Designer decor is getting more and more expensive, so I wanted to see how far I could really push my budget. That meant recreating 30 high-end pieces inspired by Anthropologie, Pottery Barn, Magnolia, Lulu and Georgia, and more. Some of these might surprise you. They definitely surprised me. Now grab your coffee, get comfy, and let's dive in. I love candle warmers, but the glass shades always felt a little cold and harsh to me. I wanted something warmer with more texture, something that felt closer to a woven basket than an appliance. For the material, I used trim from a Dollar Tree straw hat that they have out every spring. I had to take it apart for a different project, and the way it naturally bends made it perfect for wrapping around the glass shade. I attached it with construction adhesive, and used hot glue to hold everything in place while it set. Most woven shades like this are handmade and sell for around $60 on Etsy. I already have this trim from another project, but even if you have to buy the hat for $1.25, you're still recreating a $60 shade for practically nothing. Now, candle warmers can get quite hot, so this is something you'll want to use with care and never leave unattended. And here's how it turned out. The natural texture completely changed the look. It feels so much softer and more intentional now, and I love how it looks in my entryway. So this next piece actually surprised me. I've been wanting one of those Magnolia-Style hanging mirrors, the ones with the decorative rail and chain, and I decided to try making one with Dollar Tree supplies. For the rail, I used a dowel rod from Walmart, but you could use the Dollar Tree version. For the finials on each end, I used a rook piece from the Dollar Tree chess and checker set. The chain came from one of those hanging mason jar lids, and to connect everything, I used a few links from a Dollar Tree garden chain. I painted the dowel rod black to match my space, then hot glued the rook pieces on each end. For the mirror itself, I used a Dollar Tree round mirror and a black frame. It was already the right color, so no painting needed there. To attach the chain to the frame, I drilled 2 small holes and inserted eye hooks from Dollar Tree picture frame hardware kit. I originally put them too close together and I had to re-drill, but once I got the spacing right, everything came together. I touched up the eye hook with some black paint since they were originally gold, just to keep everything cohesive. And I couldn't believe how it turned out. It's honestly one of my favorite pieces I've made. And if gold works better in your space, you could easily paint everything that color instead. Black just happens to work for mine. Now this next one is a simple change, but it might be one of the most satisfying. I thrifted this wooden paper towel holder for about $2, and even though it was made for the kitchen, the shape immediately felt like it could be something else. It had a small hole drilled into the base, so I filled that with wood filler and gave the whole piece a light sand and stain to warm it up. That was it. No complicated build, no extra hardware. So here's what I did with it. Styled as a hat stand, it completely changed how the piece felt. I first tried it with a fedora, then with a straw hat I picked up in Bermuda, and both worked beautifully. This might actually be one of the most satisfying transformations. It's the kind of piece that looks intentional and collected, but really just came from seeing something familiar in a different way. This next DIY was inspired by those Magnolia Lincoln wood frames that feel architectural, almost like small sculptures. For the base, I used a Thrifted candlestick holder, but you could easily use one from Dollar Tree. And for the frame, I grabbed one of Dollar Tree's newer frames with the butterfly detail. It already had that black and copper look, but I spray painted both pieces black so everything felt cohesive. The frame came with a moody forest print in black, white, and gray, and honestly, it was perfect as is, so no art swap needed. I glued the frame directly to the candlestick base with some E6000 and hot glue, and that was it. And this piece feels like something you could have owned for years. It just has that heirloom quality that never goes out of style. This next DIY was inspired by a Lulu and Georgia vase, and it's a technique I've used before for my bedroom, but I wanted to revisit with a slightly different look. I started with a simple glass vase and sprayed it white as a base. For the pattern, I used floral napkins, this time with green botanicals. These napkins are 2-ply, so I separated the top layer, cut the flowers into sections, and applied them with homemade Mod Podge of white school glue and water. To finish it off, like the inspiration, I painted the lip and the inside of the vase to look like it was a clay pot. To do that, I used a warm clay tone paint. I also lightly distressed a few areas so it looked like the ceramic finish had chipped over time. Once everything was dry, I filled it with an $8 bouquet from Whole Foods that I picked up from a birthday gift. And honestly, it looks like something you'd order from a florist for $50 or more. I think this makes for an elevated gift on a budget, and I know the recipient is going to love it. This next find I recently thrifted, a silver-plated creamer and sugar bowl for $1.99 each. The sugar bowl was missing a handle, but I didn't mind that at all. Sometimes imperfections make the piece even better, and I just couldn't resist how feminine these pieces looked. They reminded me so much of my grandmother. But before I could do anything with them, they needed to be cleaned up. So I tried one of those viral TikTok silver cleaning hacks using baking soda, salt, aluminum foil, and hot water. And I'll be honest, it didn't work very well. But I still wanted to show it because not every hack lives up to the hype. So I ended up using the pink stuff to get the shine I was looking for. I did leave some patina because I love that look. Once they were cleaned, they were ready for the DIY I planned, which takes 5 minutes. Super quick and easy. So I wanted the sugar bowl to become a candle using sand wax. And then the creamer became a match holder. I filled it with matches and glued a striker to the bottom. They're small changes, but together they make a really beautiful little pair. Practical, layered, imperfect, and full of character. This next DIY was inspired by the Lachlan frame from Lulu and Georgia. I used a frame I already had on hand, but you could absolutely start with a Dollar Tree frame. Honestly, theirs might even look a little more authentic. For the detail, I used pearl vase filler from the Dollar Tree's floral section and glued each piece around the frame with hot glue to create the beaded look. Once everything was attached, I sprayed the frame and the pearls black to unify the finish. You could also use Dollar Tree craft paint and keep this completely Dollar Tree. This frame works with art, family photos, and they make great gifts. So when I was at the Dollar Tree, I spotted these rose tea lights. The flowers were made from foam, and I immediately thought of those brass roses from the LoveShackFancy collection at Pottery Barn. The originals retail for right around $80 to $100. So I grabbed a pack of 2 for $1.25. And as soon as I got home, I took them outside and gave them a few light coats of metallic gold spray paint. Because they're so lightweight, they keep shifting in the wind, so I just worked in thin layers and let them dry in between. Once they were fully coated, I felt like they needed leaves, just like the inspiration piece. So I grabbed a couple of faux rose stems from my stash, removed a couple of leaves, and spray painted those gold as well, and hot glued them to the base, and that was it. 2 beautiful brass-inspired roses for $1.25. This next DIY was inspired by a rattan pedestal bowl on Lulu and Georgia's website, but it retails upwards of $90, and I knew it could be recreated, especially since Goodwill always has tons of woven baskets. It was really about finding the 2 that fit together properly and had similar tones. For the base, you want a smaller round style basket to create the pedestal, and for the top, something wider to make the bowl. I found both of mine at Goodwill. They were a total of $5.24 because the smaller one was on sale. Once I got home, I gave them a few dunks in some hot soapy water and disinfectant. Once they were dry, I glued them together using E6000 and weighted them down with a few heavy books to make sure they were solid contact when they dried. After everything was set, I realized I wanted the tone to be a little deeper and closer to the inspiration. I could have spray painted it, but I prefer using a water-based wax. This way you can water it down and get in all the nooks and crannies. It was a quick step, but it made a huge difference. And I love the scale of this piece, and I can already tell it's going to be a staple for entertaining. For now, I styled it on my dining room table. This one actually came to me while I was walking through Dollar Tree. I spotted a piece from their Fairy Garden collection and immediately thought it would make the perfect handle for a butter dish. I've always loved those antique cut glass butter dishes, and Magnolia has a similar stoneware version. But once I saw the little flower, I thought it would be fun to put my own spin on it. You can really use any kind of knob or finial for the top, but this sweet floral detail felt perfect for spring, and it would make such a cute Mother's Day gift. Dollar Tree almost always carries the glass plate and bowl, so I simply attached the flower to the bottom of the bowl with E6000 to create the handle, and that was it. Simple, a little whimsical, and it looks like something you'd find at a small designer boutique. I just love making decorative pieces, but I'm just as motivated by upgrading everyday functional items, especially when the designer versions feel overpriced. And Pottery Barn has a beautiful woven toilet paper holder that retails for $59. And while I love the look of it, I just couldn't justify that price for something that holds toilet paper. So I started paying attention at the thrift store, specifically looking for baskets with two sturdy handles, one on each side. And now that I've made one, I actually notice them all the time. And once I found the right basket, I grabbed a Dollar Tree plunger, took off the rubber piece and cut the handle down to size, and then stained it to be closer to the basket color. Then I slid it through the handles with the toilet paper, and that was it. A $59 Pottery Barn look for $4. Speaking of small details that make a space feel finished, I needed a doorstop for my laundry room door. I had fallen in love with the Anthropologie Travertine doorstop, but it retails for around $68. And since I've worked with Quikrete before, I knew I could probably recreate something similar with the right mold, so I headed to Dollar Tree. I was looking for something to replicate those carved organic vertical indentations like the Anthropologie version. I checked the cups, I checked the hardware section, I even considered a small trash can, but then in the baby aisle I spotted a Pedialyte container with horizontal ridges around the side, and that was the detail I was looking for. When I got home, I emptied the Pedialyte into a glass and then cut the top off the container, lightly sprayed the inside with cooking spray, and mixed my concrete to about oatmeal consistency. I poured it and let it set overnight. The next day, I peeled off the mold using a box cutter and some scissors. The texture was perfect for the faux travertine, so I gave it a coat of off-white paint, then layered in lightly some darker paint colors using a damp paper towel to help mimic the natural variation of stone. I used a paintbrush to soften any harsh lines so it felt organic and not painted. And I love how this turned out. It's technically a doorstop, but it could be used easily as a styled piece of sculpture, on a shelf, or used as a bookend, even as a paperweight. To finish it off, I went through my stash of drawer pulls and found a brass knob that matched the inspiration piece. A little E6000 on top, and it was done. Once I start upgrading one thing in a space, I can't unsee the rest. Does that happen to you? So I was looking at my toilet brush holder, which was looking pretty sad. Dusty, scratched, just tired. So after giving it a good clean, I started browsing online to see if there was something a little more elevated we could recreate instead of replacing it. That's when I found this one from Mod Ceramics. I love how unexpected the floral print was, and I knew I could give mine a similar look using what I already had. I started with a quick scuff sand on both the metal handle and the plastic base so the primer would adhere properly, especially since the handle is a high-touch area. I used a bonding primer so it would really hold up over time. Let that dry and then applied a couple of light coats of white spray paint. Once everything was dry, I grabbed some toile napkins from my stash. I've used these on other projects before, and I applied them to the front using a simple homemade Mod Podge mixture of white glue and water. To mimic the inspiration piece, I painted the top rim and the bottom in a deep navy to frame the design and give it that finished look. After everything cured, I sealed the entire piece with a matte clear top coat to protect it from moisture and everyday use. And now, instead of something that looks forgotten, it actually feels intentional. Who knew a toilet brush could look pretty? This next piece was inspired while I was browsing Lulu and Georgia's website. I came across this beautiful white ceramic shell planter that retails for $144, and I loved the shape. So I kept that idea planted in my mind, and I kept looking out for something similar. I just thought this would be perfect for my patio. I couldn't believe it when I spotted this shell planter at Goodwill for $2.99. It wasn't the right color for my space, but the shape was almost identical, and at $2.99, it felt like the perfect candidate for a dupe. I applied a bonding primer, and once that dried, a couple of coats of white paint. Since the inspiration piece had that glossy ceramic finish, I sealed mine with a clear gloss top coat to mimic the same look. And now it has the same sculptural presence as the $144 version, but for just $3. And then I spotted this guest towel holder at the thrift store for just $1. It was definitely giving 1980s with that mauve finish, but I immediately saw the potential. I sprayed it my favorite champagne bronze, and suddenly it felt classic instead of dated. Styled with a few towels, it's just a sweet little moment in the bathroom. This wood frame idea was inspired by one I saw at Pottery Barn. I love the scale of it, and since I already had a window frame at home, it felt like the perfect piece to update instead of buying something new. The size was exactly right for the space, but the finish had started to feel a little busy for the area. So I removed the old chippy paint, which actually sanded off pretty easily, and then I took a dark antiquing wax for a richer tone. The change alone made the piece feel calmer, more grounded, and much more intentional, and it immediately worked better with my other pieces and furniture. The biggest transformation, though, was adding a mirror behind the panes. I had the mirror cut at Lowe's. They're one of the only places that will cut mirror affordably and to exact measurements, which makes the project feel this much more accessible if you've never worked with mirror before. But instead of gluing it permanently, I mounted the mirror using small metal offsets. This way, if I ever change my mind, I can remove the mirror and use it for another project. I can remove it without damaging anything. That's the beauty of the offsets. And I always try to build flexibility into projects like this, especially for pieces in high traffic spaces. And if you don't have a frame to recreate this look, you can always use Dollar Tree framed mirrors and glue them together to get the same scale. And if you don't like the black ones, grab some of the 4x4 mirrors and frames and go that route. Now it's funny, I wasn't exactly sure about this piece at first, but once it was up and styled, it was actually what the space needed. It feels more refined, more cohesive, and much more in line with how I want this area to feel going into the new year. Every time I walk past it, I love it more and more, and I think that's the best sign that the update was worth it. So when I recently spotted a shelf on Pottery Barn's website, it reminded me how timeless this design really is, and how easy it is to recreate at home. You see, I originally made shelves like these years ago when I wanted to display photos of my son and my partner's son without doing a full gallery wall. They ended up being one of my favorite projects because they're simple, flexible, and easy to customize. The smaller version I'm making today is using Dollar Tree wood, and I'm planning to use it in an upcoming makeover. But you can make these shelves any size or configuration you want. The key is keeping all of the wood pieces the same length. That's what makes it work. For my larger shelves, I had Home Depot cut all of the wood for me. I paid around $30 for two 4-foot shelves, and putting them together took about 20 minutes with just a few screws. I'll leave the measurements in the description box if you want to try this yourself. For the smaller shelf, I stain the wood before assembling it. If you glue it first, the stain won't absorb evenly, so doing it this way makes a big difference in the final finish. What makes this shelf so versatile is how you finish it. A different stain or paint completely changes the look, which means it can work with a lot of different decor styles. And the shelf has so many uses: photos, plants, or even decorative objects, just to name a few. And I'll be using the smaller version in next week's makeover in a different way, so make sure you're subscribed if you don't want to miss that. My next project was inspired by Pottery Barn's shell shadow box wall art. These pieces retail for around $600 and come in a few different versions: tulip shell, oyster shell, and a few others. But I want to pause here for a second because pieces like this are often misunderstood. At first glance, they can feel coastal or seasonal, but what really draws me to them isn't the shell itself, it's the texture, the materials, the layering. That's what makes this kind of artwork year-round and feel elevated rather than decorative. In order to recreate this, I used an old wooden word sign I already had and flipped it over to the back. I see these signs at thrift stores all the time, and they're perfect for projects like this because they already have the depth built in. I gave mine a quick stain to warm up the wood, then added a linen background using leftover fabric and Mod Podge. That simple step immediately softened the piece and gave it that same elevated feel of the inspiration. From there, I grabbed a bag of shells from Amazon and used regular white glue to arrange them in a loose circular pattern, similar to the Pottery Barn version. This was honestly one of the most relaxing projects I've done in a while. There's no right or wrong here. You can take your time, adjust as you go, and let it come together naturally. The entire project cost about $10, and I still have plenty of shells left over for future DIYs. Once I finished and styled, it gave me exactly what I was hoping for: something calm, collected, and textural that adds interest through materials, not decoration. It fits right in with the rest of my home and feels intentional without feeling trendy. This is one of those projects that really proves you don't need expensive pieces to get that Pottery Barn look. It's all about how you layer, finish, and use what you already have. I also wanted to share this piece because the fluid style art is everywhere right now. You'll see versions like this at Pottery Barn and other high-end stores for as much as $200 a piece. What I love about this style is that it's incredibly forgiving. And it's not about precision, it's about movement and flow, which is why it works so well in so many spaces. Plus, it would be very easy to recreate. But Dollar Tree actually has a similar print, and honestly, it works beautifully just the way it is. You don't have to change a thing, but if you want to customize it, something as simple as changing the frame color, a soft blush, a warm neutral, even a muted tone, completely shifts the feel. This is one of those pieces that works well year-round and isn't tied to a theme or a season. It's soft, artsy, and calming without demanding attention, which makes it perfect for a bathroom, a guest room, or any space you want something interesting but not busy. So these sculptural bookends at Pottery Barn really caught my eye. They are stunning and made of red clay and hand painted, but will cost as much as $120 for the large set. It's just a beautiful piece of art, and again, this piece that isn't seasonal, but it could be if you want it to be. So I wanted to see if I could recreate the same look using a few simple materials. When I started experimenting with the sculptural heart, I wasn't focused on making it perfect. I was paying attention to the shape, size, and texture. I used Quikrete for a few of the heart-shaped molds from the Dollar Tree to see which one gave me the best shape. When mixing the Quikrete, I like to sift out the rocks for a smoother finish. I also mixed to the consistency of oatmeal, and this time I experimented with mixing in some latex paint with the water to lessen the gray color of the concrete. With the plastic mold, I sprayed it well with cooking spray so that it would release easily when set. Once the hearts were dry, it was time to make the bases. With the plastic bowl, I sprayed it with cooking spray, and then the tin mold, I used some plastic wrap to ensure that it would also come out easily. Once everything was fully cured, I sanded the edges a little, and then it was time for paint. I went a little darker than the Pottery Barn version, but that's the beauty of making your own art. You can always adjust the finish later if you want something lighter or warmer. And pieces like this work because of their imperfections. The softened edges and the stone-like surface, that's what gives them an artisan feel, rather than a crafty one. Styled with books or layered on a shelf, they really read as sculptural objects instead of themed decor, which is why they work year-round and feel so timeless. This piece I loved right away. It felt collected and vintage. The Anthropologie version of this urn is $26, and that's without any greenery. I made mine using a $1.50 Dollar Tree trash can. But before I even touched paint, I needed to change the silhouette. The inspiration piece had more curve and presence, so I started bending and shaping the wire to mimic that profile. I also tested the planter I planned on using just to make sure the scale worked, and if it hadn't, I could have easily adjusted with a smaller pot or went the floral foam route. Once I liked the shape, I took it outside for a quick coat of spray paint, and then I remembered I had this metal ribbon in my stash from the Dollar Tree, and it felt like the kind of detail to add vintage charm. This step is completely optional, but it adds that layered, collected look. And if you can't find it at Dollar Tree, Hobby Lobby carries something similar. Once everything dried, I deepened the color with a little Java chalk paint, just dabbing and swiping it on to create that aged, time-worn patina. This is a step that makes it feel less handmade and more like an heirloom. Now it was time to add the plant, but before I did, I tucked in some moss around the base and then filled in the sides like the inspiration. And now that $1.50 trash can can officially become a vintage style urn. This next piece might be my favorite kind of transformation, something sculptural and organic. The Anthropologie version of this cement bowl candle is $388, and I just couldn't justify that. So I headed to Dollar Tree looking for the right shape to use as a mold. I wanted something narrow at the base that gently flared up at the top. That soft graduation is what gives it a high-end sculptural look. And this one was perfect. I grabbed two so I could create the mold. Once I got home, I mixed up some Quikrete to an oatmeal-like consistency and filled the bottom of the bowl about 3/4 full. Then I pressed a second bowl into the center, pushing the cement up along the sides, and I added a 10-pound weight to keep everything in place. The first attempt didn't go as planned. It didn't fully fill the sides, and once it cured, the thickness wasn't consistent. I realized two things here. I needed more cement, closer to 80%, and I needed to place it on the ground for better leverage so I could control the pressure evenly when I added the second bowl. So I tried again, and this time it worked perfectly. After 24 hours of curing, I flipped it over, and this one was beautiful. And then I filled it with candle sand and added wicks I picked up on Amazon, and I'll link them in the description box below. You can even add a drop or two of essential oil near the wicks for fragrance. I intentionally added extra wicks because my vision is to use this in the warmer months in our fire pit, almost like a tabletop fire feature. The entire piece cost me $10, and that's only because I already had the Quikrete. But a 50-pound bag of Quikrete is around $7 and will last through multiple projects. I love how organic and substantial this feels, and honestly, it doesn't feel like a DIY at all. It looks like a true statement piece. And apparently, I wasn't done with the whole stone and fire theme, because when I saw this $2 glass vessel at Goodwill, I immediately knew what I could do with it. An Anthropologie-inspired concrete oil burner, and this shape was almost identical. And when I got home, I realized I had its bright orange cousin in my stash, which obviously wasn't going to stay orange for long. I started with a coat of gray primer so the next step would adhere properly. To get that concrete look, I mixed powdered joint compound with a little paint and water, just enough to create a thick, spreadable texture. I layered it on and let it cure for 24 hours before sanding any areas that were too raised and rough, then adding just a subtle depth of color with a damp paper towel and acrylic paint in grays, black, and white, mixing them to mimic aged cement and dabbing and swiping. To make these functional oil lamps, I picked up heat-resistant ceramic inserts and wicks from Amazon. You get 7 of each for about $6, and I'll make sure to link them below. So my total cost for 2 lamp burners without the oil was just about $4. The inspiration pieces would have been $100. I then added clean burning lamp oil, and I was careful to test everything before styling. And if you decide to recreate this, just make sure you're using ultra refined lamp oil designed for indoor use, and always test your vessel first, especially if it's thinner glass. My glass stayed cool to the touch and they worked beautifully. The oil lamp wasn't the only Anthropologie-inspired piece I found on this trip to Goodwill. The same sculptural silhouette showed up again, this time as a footed planter. Anthropologie carries a very similar version, but this one was only $2.99. I even spotted a glass version, but I knew I only needed one. The transformation was simple, and honestly, sometimes that's where the magic is. I started with the same gray primer I used earlier just to prep the surface and give the paint something to grip onto. Once it dried, the goal wasn't texture this time. The inspiration piece was smooth and stone-like, so I focused on color instead. I mixed a light gray, a darker gray, and a touch of black. Using a damp paper towel, I dabbed and pounced the paint on, building the color slowly until it had that soft, concrete-inspired finish. Nothing heavy, nothing overworked. And once the planter was done, it needed greenery. And the Anthropologie version was styled with an orange tree, and I loved that detail. I already had orange stems from Dollar Tree in my stash, and I realized this was the perfect time to finally use them. I also wanted the branches to feel natural, not just forced into foam. So I tried a drilling technique I've seen other creators use. I didn't know about this method when I made my lemon tree, and honestly, I wish I had. The result looks so much more realistic. Most people use olive or ficus branches when doing this technique, but adding fruit made it a little trickier. I had to dodge the oranges while drilling, and using a branch I had picked up at Goodwill for a past Christmas project, I drilled the holes, placed the stems as naturally as possible, and secured them with a bit of hot glue. To finish it off, I added it to floral foam and moss, just enough to soften everything and ground the arrangement. And just like that, a $2.99 thrifted planter became a high-end piece that adds a great pop of color to my space. On a separate trip to Goodwill, I came across this small metal table for $2.99, and I'm pretty sure it originally came from Five Below. In fact, they still sell a similar version for around $7. But that wasn't what caught my eye. What I saw was the shape, because Anthropologie carries a nearly identical table retailing for $128. And I just love the bold Fiesta-inspired colors they offer, especially the blue. So I took a quick trip to Home Depot and color matched the shade as closely as possible. The transformation itself was simple but intentional. First, I sprayed the legs black like the inspiration piece. For the tabletop, I applied a few coats of blue, but I didn't aim for a perfectly solid finish. The Anthropologie piece has areas where the color feels slightly worn, almost layered, so I left subtle variations in coverage to mimic that effect. But the real upgrade came at the end. I finished the top with a high gloss clear coat, and that single step completely changed how the paint looked. It instantly felt richer, more polished, more finished. And just like that, the table was done. It folds flat, doubles as a tray, and tucks away easily when not in use, which makes it as practical as it is beautiful. Another everyday piece reimagined to feel high-end. This whimsical sign caught my eye when I was browsing the garden section of Anthropologie's website. It was playful, charming, and felt like the kind of unexpected detail that makes an outdoor space feel personal, and I immediately thought it would make a beautiful Mother's Day gift. For $42, it was one of those pieces I knew I could recreate for much less. So that's exactly what I did. And since I already had scrap wood in my stash, The only thing I needed were the letters. I found raised wooden ones for about $6 at Michael's. And the inspiration also had a small decorative butterfly detail in the corners, which I didn't have, but I did have raised stickers from Dollar Tree that gave me the same dimensional effect. For the letters and the decorative details, I used an off-white spray paint to mirror the inspiration piece. For the wood base, I made one intentional change. Instead of the original color, I chose a green tone, something that would feel more organic and blend naturally into my garden and planter area. Once everything was dry, I used wood glue to assemble the piece. To create the trim around the edges, I masked the border with washi tape, which made it easy to get clean, sharp lines. And that was it. The sign was finished, ready to style in a planter and just as charming in the garden itself. A small detail, but one that adds personality, warmth, and that collected feel I love. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next Saturday.